Well, before we started Matchbox 20, three of us, the bass player, the drummer, and me, Paul and Brian and me, we're in another band called Tallahassee Secret, and the only thing is it wasn't a good band. And that was like, all right, the only thing holding us back. I mean, we could have went all the way if we had talent.
You know, the middle-of-the-road rock scene of the late 90s and early aughts is a real weak spot for me. There are tons of bands from that time that I know the names of, but I only know a thing or two about them. So like Cake, I only know them because they signed with Capricorn. The Wallflowers, I only know them because Bob Dylan's son is in the band. Collective Soul, I only know them because I saw them live when they were inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame the same year as Barry Oakley. Otherwise, I'm positive I'd be constantly confusing Collective Soul and Soul Asylum. And if not for the huge hit that was Smooth by Santana, I don't know that I would have all that much idea about Rob Thomas or Matchbox 20. Maroon 5.
Strong opener for the season, Jim. We're expecting to see good things from the Matchbox starting lineup.
But now, after just a bit of research, I think I have a slightly better handle on their backstory. Here are the 5 things for Matchbox 20. It all starts in Orlando with a band called Tallahassee Secret, an original rock band fronted by Rob Thomas. After building up a following in Florida, Tallahassee Secret was approached about a possible contract with Lava, a subsidiary of Atlantic Records. A showcase was set up for the band at Potbelly's in Tallahassee. Hey, I know that place! After getting the initial go-ahead from Atlantic's rep, the band went up to Atlanta to record 4 songs for their upcoming debut, including the future single 3 a.m.
It's 3 a.m., I must be lonely.
But turns out Atlantic was only interested in Rob Thomas and had intended all along to start a whole new project with guitarist Adam Gaynor, who worked at Criteria Studios in Miami, long connected with Atlantic Records, and Kyle Cook, who had attended the Atlanta Institute of Music and also coincidentally grew up a couple of doors down from the Atlantic rep in charge of the project. Rob Thomas, though, insisted on keeping his rhythm section, the bassist Brian Yale and the drummer Paul Doucette, and thus was born Matchbox 20, Heaven 17.
A closer match than I think a lot of people expected, Jim, but Matchbox remains undefeated early in the season.
In 1996, they recorded Yourself or Someone Like You, which always reminds me of the Fire Sign Theater album called Waiting for the Electrician or Someone Like Him.
How's the Bluecadelic Psycho Raga Rock Old Folks Dance Marathon doing?
Dropping like flies.
Groovy.
The album was recorded at Triclops Studios in Atlanta, the very same studio where Tallahassee Secret had recorded their 4 songs for the EP the year before. The original name of the album was Woodshed Diaries, but was changed after Paul Doucette heard a singer at Largo in LA dedicate a song to You or Someone Like You. When the album was released, for its first week, it only sold about 600 copies. But after that, it went on to be a huge seller. Platinum 12 times over on the popularity of songs like Push, Long Day, Real World, and 3 a.m.
It's 3 a.m., I must be lonely.
Fun fact, the guy in the cover of You or Someone Like You is Frank Torres, and he ended up suing the band because he never gave them permission to use the photo. After a tour to support the first album, but before they could go into the studio to record their next, Rob Thomas co-wrote a song with songwriter Ital Shur. And that song was originally written for George Michael, but subsequently was pitched for an upcoming comeback by Carlos Santana. Initially, Thomas was only planning to help with the songwriting on Smooth, but apparently Santana liked his voice on the demo so much, they asked him to record it for the album. The result, as I'm sure you already know, was gigantic. Not only did Supernatural sell more than 13 million copies in the US, certified platinum 15 times over, but Rob Thomas himself took home 3 Grammys as a result. Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Popular Music Collaboration with Vocals. With the release of their second album, Mad Season, some changes were made in their approach. Well, for starters, they decided to spell the word 20 in the name instead of using the digits 20. The sound of Mad Season was seen as a departure from their debut album, more experimental, more orchestral. And in fact, Mad Season did include a number of singles that did pretty well, with the biggest being Bent, which made it to number 1 on the Hot 100. But the album, successful by anyone's standards, going quadruple platinum, was still not as gigantic as their debut. Funny how the music business works sometime, isn't it? For their third album, they decided on yet another departure, this time choosing harder rock sounds compared to their previous two recordings. They also chose to record in Bearsville Studios in Woodstock, as made famous by Todd Rundgren's early 70s recordings. To help, they called in engineer Greg Collins, who had previously worked with System of a Down and Red Hot Chili Peppers. The resulting album is the album I'm listening to this week, More Than You Think You Are. Again, the album did amazing by anyone's standards, producing multiple top 40 singles and selling very well, but again, just a bit less than the previous album. Seems to be a pattern for Matchbox 20. Level 42.
Mark King absolutely dominating in the second half, Jim. Tough loss for Matchbox on the road.
And even though what followed was a multi-year hiatus, it's not the end of the story for the band entirely. But maybe that's a story for another day. And that's the 5 things for Matchbox 20. I am off to listen to More Than You Think You Are. Back soon with first impressions.
We kind of like doing it that way. We don't really get the chance to do it a lot. So it's like when someone says, hey, you can play acoustic, we jump at it.
Yeah?
Like that.
You enjoy playing acoustically?
Yeah, it's fun. Because it gets, we play it. We've been on tour for 2 years.
I have to say, I was mildly surprised after spinning More Than You Think You Are for the first time. I mean, if given the choice between the popular one, the experimental one, or the hard-edged one, I'm choosing the experimental one every time. But despite the fact that these songs are indeed a bit harder edged than the few songs I already know from Matchbox 20, Eve 6.
Brilliant bounce back for Thomas this week, Jim, largely on the strength of his defense.
The hard edge is not the entire story. I mean, there's banjo on the album. How hard can it be? The album starts with Feel. And here's where I have to get a bit deep into some theory. Buckle up, folks. Starting with the very basics, what you need to know is that some intervals sound pleasing, and some sound dissonant. But there's one interval that sounds so dissonant that in ecclesiastic music, it's called the devil's interval. If you play a note that's 6 semitones above your bass note, you get the interval sometimes called an augmented fourth or diminished fifth, but most commonly called a tritone. Here's the thing. There's a tritone hidden in the major scale. The interval between the 4th note and the 7th note of a major scale is a tritone. And since there's a tritone in the major scale, it only stands to reason that there's also a tritone in every mode of the major scale. Lots and lots of blues, for example, exploits the tritone between the 3 and the 7 in the Mixolydian mode. But one of my favorite built-in tritones is the Dorian mode, between the minor 3rd and the natural 6th, with the root note being a minor 3rd away from both of them. And that's the very first thing you hear on the album. The opening riff of Feel hits you with this tritone immediately. And I like that very much. Next song is Disease, co-written by Mick Jagger. It's true. After the release of Supernatural, Mick decided he wanted to collaborate with Rob Thomas for Mick's upcoming solo album, Goddess in the Doorway. See, they wrote 2 songs together, Visions of Paradise, which ended up on Mick's album, and Disease, which Mick said sounded more like Matchbox 20. Blink 182.
Matchbox taking a real pummeling here, Jim. I don't know that I've ever seen a stronger starting lineup than this young Blink team.
Disease has that same minor key with dominant 5 sound you can hear on Smooth, but the groove this time is more a kind of straight rock / disco hybrid thing.
I got all disease.
Next is a ballad called Bright Lights, which to me has hints of both Drift Away by Dobie Gray and What's Up by Four Non Blondes.
Maybe you'll find something that's enough to keep you.
And next is the song I rolled last week, Unwell. And indeed, there's a banjo playing the opening riff in fourths. It's kind of fun. But the rest of the song is a pretty typical 90s sounding sensitive guy sings about what a bad person he is type ballad. Like Counting Crows or Goo Goo Dolls or Puddle of Mud or Edwin McCain.
I'm not crazy, I'm just a little impaired.
Cold has some Guess Who / Lenny Kravitz fuzz tone guitar right for the intro. But just when I was ready to dismiss this song as a one-note uninteresting thing, they throw a secondary dominant in the chorus. Not only that, but a key change for the last chorus. Now we're talking. All I Need starts off very alt-country and has some of the most inventive Beatles-inspired chords on the album.
You can still lose even if you really try.
Very Wilco. But wait, there's more. Hand Me Down is another ballad, and it starts with a pedal steel. I thought this was supposed to be their rockin' album.
'Cause no one's tried to give you what you need.
Some clever passing chords in the changes too. So Downfall. This song is what I kind of thought the whole album would be like.
And I'll be your downfall.
It's a harder rock track with like a single note cello style melody on the guitar and also eighth notes, double stops, a couple of nice changes in the verses too. But then halfway in, piano and church choir like you do. Soul relies on the dynamics difference between the quiet piano and clean guitars on the verses compared to the big power chords over open strings thing that happens in the chorus. A little bit of modulation for the tiny guitar solo near the end. Very tiny. You're So Real is a pretty typical mid-tempo straight-ahead rock thing, but I don't know, I think they pull it off pretty well. I think I like it despite the fact that there's not a whole lot to it. And the last song is The Difference. The intro is synth pads and clean guitar with changes that feel very Bruce Springsteen. With Rob Thomas's unmistakable tendency to extend his lyric phrases over the bar line. Overall, well, I went into this thinking I would hear the same kind of stuff I'd heard from their earlier albums, only louder. Instead, what I think I hear is a more eclectic set of influences and some intelligence in the songwriting. But, not entirely a departure. It's still them. If you went in expecting to hear the same band that did Push, you won't be disappointed. So maybe about 20% clever and 80% classic Matchbox 20. MC5.
Great recovery after a tough loss, Jim. Doucette and Yale in top form.
Anyway, those are my first impressions. Back soon with final thoughts.
What's more important, to be recognized as a songwriter or as a singer?
Purely sex symbol.
I don't have no appreciation for More Than You Think You Are. Ooh, a double negative. How fun. It's clear to me that Rob Thomas has a good amount of charisma, a memorable vocal delivery, decent ear for instrumental harmony in his songwriting, but I don't know. Maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I would have identified this album as being for those people who just love it when the songs at the concert sound exactly like the songs on the CD. But more and more, I think I just need to come to terms with the fact that that's what rock is for the most part. But there was a time when the prevailing trend in rock was to make it into a more spontaneous, risk-taking art form. And certainly my dad was kind of in the middle of all that. But the more I listen to modern examples of the genre, the more I realize that the people who think like me aren't making rock anymore. Well, more accurately, the ones that do have been relegated to the much maligned category of jam band. Though very occasionally I'll find a band that's original enough and odd enough that their very existence makes me happy. My most recent find like this is Frankie and the Witch Fingers. And none of this has all that much to do with this week's album, but as I've been pondering my lukewarm reaction to the music on More Than You Think You Are, these are the thoughts I've tended to dwell on. And I do try and be as honest as I possibly can when I'm talking about the albums I'm listening to. So yeah, the songs on More Than You Think You Are have some cleverness and some evidence of stronger than average songwriting, but not strong enough that I see myself reaching for this album instead of, I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight or Court and Spark or Bookends or something. Don't get me wrong, it has its moments. The riff on Feel, top notch. All I Need, pretty great power pop. The performances are solid, and there's some creative choices for instrumentation and for textures. But on the whole, this album just didn't move me that much. It all seems too rigid, too tightly controlled, too safe. But like I said at the beginning of this episode, the mainstream rock scene of the 90s and aughts is a big blind spot for me. So if nothing else, I'm glad I have a better handle on the music of Matchbox 20. Ben Folds 5.
Folds with a brave but ultimately futile display in the final game of the season.
So that just leaves my 5-word overview of More Than You Think You Are. Almost clever enough to stick. Now let's see what I'll be listening to next week. Roll for year 1959. We really have been hitting the 50s pretty hard this season. I think this is the 4th time we've rolled a 50s song. So here's the week and month. The 2nd week of May, 1959. We're pretty close to that time of the year right now as we're recording this. And now, chart position is number 96. And on the Hot 100, 2nd week of May 1959, number 96 was Tallahassee Lassie by Freddie Cannon. Freddie Cannon. That's not a name I know at all, I don't think. It's 1959, so I'm not sure, is he a big band leader or a hillbilly swing guy or R&B or rockabilly or what? Well, Tallahassee Lassie appears on the album The Explosive Freddie Cannon. So that's what I'm listening to next. Thanks for hanging out with me, everyone. I will see you next week.